I'm Kerry Stinson, and my journey through life has been quite an adventure. For over 20 years, I played Barney the Dinosaur on tour and 7 seasons of the hugely popular TV show Barney and Friends. Now my journey is to bring together friends and guests from all over the entertainment world for inspiring and at times amusing behind-the-scenes conversation. I'm Kerry Stinson, and this is Purple Roads. Hey, welcome to another episode of Purple Roads. I'm Kerry Stinson. I'm so glad you're here. We have been having so much fun on these episodes, and I am so excited that you're back with us. I want to thank our sponsor, Infusion HF70, for being part of Purple Roads. And I got to tell you, we're going to get right into this. We had an amazing episode back in December with my good buddy Josh Martin and several of the voiceover actors from Dragon Ball Z. And we are really excited who we've got today. Josh, you're with me. Who we got today?
Hello. Well, we have a super special treat for everyone. We have not one, but two of the originators of basically the voiceover anime industry in Dallas, Texas, if not the country. Mr. Justin Cook.
Hello. Hi, how are you?
And Mr. Chris Sabat.
Hey, how are you? Josh, it's awesome to be here.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you very much.
I'm so glad.
Kerry, nice to meet you.
Hey, thank you. Nice meeting you guys. I'm so glad to have you here. I have had the privilege of going to a couple of anime and seeing and understanding how popular this is. And I am just excited to have you guys here. Kind of talk about your experiences.
Thanks
in
for
anime
having us
and Dragon Ball Z.
Sure, yeah. It's been a wild ride. It's been a fun ride for sure.
When did you start, Justin?
Yeah, well, I guess we were just kind of talking about that, but like 21 years, I think it's been being produced in Texas, Dragon Ball, as a franchise. I started with it as an ADR engineer alongside this cool guy here, recording everything he needed recorded in February of 2000.
All right.
Had you guys done voiceover work before?
I'm going to speak for him for a second.
Sure.
Chris had, for sure. I had only done some radio work, and I had done some college radio. Okay. Very, very little experience at all with it. Matter of fact, most of my experience came from sitting shotgun to Sabat, listening to Dragon Ball Z getting recorded.
Well, the cool thing is, I started in radio as well.
Okay.
Actually. That's where I started, and I was doing a lot of commercial type voiceover work, but not a lot of no anime work and no kind of cartoon stuff. Other than the kind of the funnier bits that we recorded for radio stations and stuff. But yeah, Justin and I was working there. We had an engineer and we needed a second one, a kind of full-time guy, because the engineer needed to go to that we had was going to become a mixer. And he likes to give me credit for teaching him a lot of things, but I'd like to just say that kind of doing this in Texas, kind of the way we did it, they loved the kind of trial by fire method, which was jump in there, just do it, get it done. And so a lot of us were just learning as we kind of went along. If you listen to the early stuff that I recorded there, it was, I mean it was arguably pretty amateurish. We did our best, but we just weren't that experienced. And luckily we did it in Texas, where we had a lot of freedom to kind of experiment and iterate and learn our craft as we went along. We didn't get fired, so we're still. And heck, Justin is pretty much the head of production at Funimation. He's over. We used to have. Well, we started with one room, then we kind of went to 2 rooms,
Wow.
and 3 rooms, and now you've got 10?
9 rooms, yeah.
Wow.
Running them for 12 hours a day.
He's got 9 rooms, plus he's got studios in other places that he has to take care of, too.
Wow.
So.
I love that. I've talked on this show about the fact I'm a huge Texan, a very proud Texan, and I love, Barney was started here, and it surprises people. We started a small little studio in Allen, Texas, and same philosophy, right? Just keep going and just keep going and just keep going and just keep going. And I would say the same thing about me. I'd never been in a costume, and boy, did I learn and grow. But I just kept going. I didn't critique myself too much. I kept going. I know Josh the same. We started in Barney together.
There was nothing around to compare it to.
Right.
I think it's the same exact case with you. There were not a ton of, there was no probably children's shows being created here in Texas, and there was no anime being dubbed in Texas too. So there was nothing there was nothing that we could use as a benchmark. We just like, all right, what works? Let's just get it done.
I think one of the nicest things about it, where in regards to it not being kind of in a, completely organized, I guess you could say, is that clocks didn't really stop us. I mean, there were many nights where we'd be recording, yourself as Vegeta into the, maybe not wee hours of the morning, but we were recording until 10 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, going all hours. And then would go to a restaurant and eat and talk about what was coming up in the storyline or what had just happened.
And sometimes go back to the studio to finish recording for the rest of the night. Like, and the one thing I've been very proud of, and I left Funimation as a full-time employee there, like around 2004.
Okay.
And I still work with them as an actor, and we provide kind of services to Funimation for recording at a different studio. But I've always been proud to sell Texas talent, because Texans are hardworking. They give it their all. Like Dragon Ball Z, I think if it had been dubbed somewhere else, if it had been dubbed, well, in fact, it was dubbed somewhere else, but if it had been dubbed like in California or New York back in the the late 90s, it wouldn't have sounded the same, because Texans, and we created this standard, but like, if you were on Dragon Ball, you were going to scream, and you were going to scream really loud, and if you didn't scream really loud, we'd take a break and then wait for you to try again, because and people in Texas will do that for you. You go out to California, they're like, oh, actually I have 15 other sessions this week, so I'm just going to give you like 10% of my voice. Like Justin is a prime example. I like half of his sessions I have to kind of go like, Justin, seriously, you can back off a little bit. He's like, nope. I only get one chance to do this, and that's all I'm doing.
And that it's that only one chance to do that, and I think that's something all three of us for sure. I can only assume all four.
Same, absolutely.
But yeah, everyone who comes in, it's like, are you kidding me? We're getting an opportunity to do this, and now with some of the shows we're working on now, it's got this legacy of what we've done for 20 years. That people are kind of there are people who have come to this area to be an anime voice actor.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
People
to me.
are moving to town to do this.
That's so cool. That is so cool. I thought it was interesting. We were talking earlier what the original audience was and how it's grown, but the age group that originally,
for sure. When we started working on Dragon Ball, we were definitely making a calculated effort to try to age the show down to make it a little bit more accessible to a younger audience.
And this wasn't entirely what Funimation even necessarily was striving for. This is also what Japan wanted. They wanted the show to be popular at all ages, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure,
right?
and to get it in at those time slots, there were certain elements of their storytelling that might exceed that particular age limit, at least for what this culture kind of feels is appropriate. But it's wild, because the deeper subject matters of which we're covering in Dragon Ball are things like Pride Before the Fall. So there, it's putting self second to what the greater good is. It's a lot of high-minded kind of thoughts that you don't normally see in your Saturday morning cartoon.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Plus, in 1998, there was still this concept that like cartoons were for children, cartoons were for kids. Now in Japan, anime has existed for a long time, and so the age group for a show can literally be like 6 to 100. Like everybody watches animation there. So there wasn't a mindset like for Americans in 1998 to kind of appreciate that stuff. So a lot of the efforts were made to kind of make the show appropriate for younger kids. Sometimes that was pretty difficult when you have characters like clearly drinking the mug of beer or something like that. You had to rotoscope in
blue liquid or something else,
grape juice or something like that. And there were these characters. They were from there were these characters that were kind of like these demons down in hell, but they were like jovial. It was a comic book character, like comical characters, but they wore these shirts that said HFIL. Like, well, technically they said HELL. They wore these T-shirts that said hell on them, but we couldn't have a cartoon on the air in 1998 that had like cartoon characters with hell written on them. So they changed it to HFIL, and we called it Home for Infinite Losers. And it just some of the changes we had to make were pretty funny. But that's been some of the coolest, most heartwarming thing about working on the show, because in 1998, and I keep referencing that because that's when we started, 99, 2000, when we would go to conventions, we'd mostly be meeting young kids. Like, we'd be meeting kids in their 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And the show has continued all these years, and now we're going to conventions currently, and those kids are in their mid-20s. And their kids are watching it. So my heart has always been, even when I meet these kids and they're 25, I still imagine that they're like 8 years old, and I'm meeting like such an excitable kid that watched that show when they were, a kid.
The 8-year-old comes out of them.
Yeah.
A lot of times when they come up
and gets to conversate with their 8-year-old. That's what's so incredible, is that Dragon Ball by itself is a generational story. It tells the story of a kid and his friends, and then it literally follows him until he gets married. He has children of his own. So it's bizarre to be associated with a show that has these two generations in it, and while at the same time, through some weird happenstance or fate, we're also getting to entertain fans that are just the same age and age group that our lead character is in the show. So it's wild. It's a generational tale with a generational audience.
Plus, those kids are probably the last generation of kids. They are the last generation of kids that had to run home to watch something. Like there was no crazy DVR back then. Kids were getting mad at their mother if they forgot to accidentally press the record button on the VHS or something like that. These kids had to work hard for the show, and not only that, they didn't have Marvel movies back then. Dragon Ball was their Marvel. Justin's known for a show that he directed called Yu Yu Hakusho that came on right after Dragon Ball Z, and a lot of your viewers will probably know Yu Yu Hakusho, because right after Dragon Ball Z, it kind of introduced the universe to anime, and Yu Yu Hakusho took that and kind of took it to another level and said, all right, you think you understand anime? Let's take it one step up. And it was pretty cool.
It's, another thing that this audience got to grow up with, and we got to kind of witness the change, is that we were moving from VHS to DVD in the first 3 or 4 years. And one of the things that DVD brought to the table in entertainment for the first time was being able to have multiple audio tracks on your one piece of video. And so when you're working with anime, which is of course originally in Japanese, to be able to have one media source that had both the original Japanese with a subtitle track as well as an English dub track, this was the first time that had ever happened. So for all the years prior to that, it was always VHS, which meant it was only had one audio track, which was always that English track. So yet again, another reason why it is that there was such an effort to try to age Dragon Ball down was we're selling these VHS tapes. This was all they were going to get. It wasn't really being aimed towards a quote-unquote anime audience. One didn't exist yet.
Wow.
You talk about Yu Yu Hakusho moving on from Dragon Ball Z and kind of opening up the anime world to everyone. What role, if any, did y'all have in that process of picking what came in? Or
in my opinion, it felt like we were kind of being opened up to anime at the same time as our audience was.
Yeah, okay,
because when it was Dragon Ball, and as I recall, the first show that came in was one called Blue Gender, and then there was a Detective Conan, which I think we changed the name to Case Closed, which is another very kid-driven kind of show, and then Yu Yu Hakusho, Fruits Basket, Kitty Grade were among these first shows. So we were learning. I mean, we'd always known, intellectually, there are other properties out there, but we hadn't necessarily seen them. We were spending all of our time watching Dragon Ball 100 times a day. So starting to see all these other shows and starting to see some of the stories that some of these other titles were telling. Like Chris was saying, it was kind of like upping our anime game, and then at the same time, we were kind of being able to let our audience kind of grow up with that as well.
Were y'all familiar with Dragon Ball Z before y'all started working on it?
I had heard of it. I lived up in a town in Colorado for a bit, and several of the buddies that lived down the hall from us were big Dragon Ball fans and Fist of the North Star fans, which is another anime. And excuse me. So they kind of introduced me to a lot of that stuff, and it was pure irony that I would move to the town that they were actually recording in.
Wow. Yeah, the Dragon Ball, I'd never heard of Dragon Ball Z. I'd only watched Same thing, Fist of the North Star. The only ones you could get in Blockbuster at the time.
Oh, wow.
Fist of the North Star, Ghost in the Shell.
Some Lupin movies.
Maybe a couple of those. Like, there wasn't much.
Gotcha.
Like, there wasn't a whole lot in the video store for that kind of thing. So when I worked on Dragon Ball, it was fresh for me. I had no idea.
So doing the voice, we had Chris Rager on and Carrie Edwards in an earlier episode. And they talked about, Chris really talked about improv, how much that helped him in this. And also they were talking about, as they record, and they were doing a little bit, how physical it is.
Yeah, very.
That you really get animated and physical when
Sure.
you're doing those voices. And I thought that was fascinating to see that process.
Well, I don't remember exactly when it occurred, but when doing reactions, if you know, there's movement in your reaction and in a sound, and to me at least, what embodies more of that action is when you feel the, I don't know, I guess this is all on video, but like when you're coming in with a punch and you're swinging in like so, the sound varies. It changes as the, you know, I mean, there's an impact, there's a buildup, there's all of these little things. You don't think of that until you start hearing a scream incorrectly or a fight that doesn't, you know, where it's just the it starts to sound very repetitive. It starts to, I mean, there's a musical element to all of these screams and yells and the reactions and the sound effects and the music that are playing. But yeah, the world of reactions is one I had no idea before getting into this.
It's pretty funny, actually. I joke about how, like, I know exactly what a fight sounds like, but I've never been in a fight. Like, I've never punched another human being before. So, like, all of it is just like, I know when a fight doesn't sound right, even though I've never really actually been in one myself. But I certainly know when it doesn't feel right. But a lot of it is physical, because part of what you're doing in anime is, like, you're watching the screen. That's probably, anime, it gets a kind of it's, in the past, it's been categorized as like, well, there's Simpsons prelay anime, and then prelay cartoons, and then there's anime. But now anime is kind of like neck and neck with all these. So many, the popularity is kind of indistinguishable at this point. But the beautiful thing about working in anime, as opposed to other types of cartoons, because other cartoons you might come in and you've got the whole script, you've got the whole cast, and you're kind of joking around and making it up, and they animate to that. There's a freedom and a joy in doing that kind of work. But anime is cool because you get to wear headphones, you have all the music and the sound effects, and everything is right in your face. You get to, you have a lot of the times you have the completed show in your headphones. And if you're a musical type of person, which a lot of people I've found in anime who are good at dubbing tend to be kind of musical in nature, that's a cool thing. You feel like you're adding your part to a vocal track.
Right.
And so when you're watching a character on the screen move around, you just instinctively kind of do what your character's doing. Now, granted, you have to use good mic technique, and you can't like drift too far from the microphone. But yeah, when you're like, I've found times when like my character's like holding it, Vegeta's holding out his arm, and he's like, Final Flash or whatever, and the people who know Dragon Ball know that's not actually what Final Flash looks like. But like, if the character's holding out your hand, you feel like this is, it doesn't help the sound at all, but you feel like you have to do the same thing as your character is doing, and when you're charging up, you'll do the same thing. And when you're finished with recording a long episode of that, you feel as beat up as those characters feel. Like,
I liken it to karaoke.
Okay.
Most folks have gone to a karaoke event or have heard that or seen that, and for whatever reason, even if they're a great singer, it doesn't seem to capture what was the original recording. You know, they just don't quite sound like Clapton and Cream, or they just don't quite sound like the Kinks or whatever it is you're doing. And the reason why is because well it's not, you're adding your voice in on top there, and if you had a director that was there, probably an anime voice director, they'd be like, okay, gotta really energize this one and pump that up towards and that's where all that feeling and that, you know, that intensity is really coming from. So one of the biggest things I learned working in anime is that this idea of like, as an actor, you read your lines, you memorize your lines, practice your part, kind of build your character, and then come in and perform. It's really not that at all. There is a real reliance on the voice director, because the other fact is you don't have all those other actors there with you. So you're not acting with 2 or 3 other people. You're just by yourself, and there very well may not even be another voice recorded. All the music and sound effects may be there, but all your conversations are just your part.
Wow.
So leaning on the voice director who kind of knows that show and knows kind of where to lead you when you start getting into some of those fight reactions or even just the line reads, because the voice director is the one who kind of understands how that whole conversation is going to play out before they've recorded the first voice. So
how long did it take you to get used to that? Being by yourself and just being directed, and even the physical aspect. I mean, at the beginning, were you doing all the hand motions, or did you just kind of let go and kind of release yourself on that?
I mean, it's hard to say, because at first when you're in there, there's no doubt that it's like when you go into the booth for the first time, it's an unnerving experience. Like all early actors have that experience where you've got the headphones on, you're hearing a lot. Some people, like, luckily some of us came from radio and doing that kind of stuff, so we're used to hearing our voices on headphones. Some people aren't used to that.
Sometimes that's the first time they've heard their voice through a set of headphones.
And so you feel like you're really in your own head, like literally hearing your own voice. You've got all this stuff happening. You're watching video and you're hearing like 3 beeps before your videos, and then you got the script in one monitor or on a piece of paper when we first started, and then the screen up here, and you're trying to chase both things and turn the page and stuff, and and so at that in those early days, you were just trying to kind of get through your line, but once you do it for a while, it's like whenever I'm instructing new people or teaching a class on or something like that, a lot of what I tell them is like, it's kind of like, once you've learned to ride the bike and everything like that, once you've gotten all of those things out of the way, once you get all that weird technical stuff, that's when it gets really fun, because I don't think about anything at all when I'm in the room except for, what is that line? How do I want it to sound, and what exactly is that character doing? And I don't have to think. Like, the beeps come naturally, where I'm on the microphone comes naturally, my breathing comes naturally. It's just when you get all that down and you become really good at it, that's when you can really focus on dialing in like the smallest things, looking for little changes when the character moves his head or sits down on a chair, picks something up. You want to add you want to add something into your voice that kind of informs that.
And it's those little moments, and I know it sounds silly, it's not the soliloquy, it's not the killer fight, it's the fact that the actor tagged some little reaction perfectly as they were saying their line and their character sat down in the chair, and you could hear that little moment where, whatever in their voice, there was something there that matched up with that sitting down action that the character had, and it's those moments that literally just breathe the life into the character. It's really crazy.
Wow.
Do you know what he's talking? Kind of get what I'm talking about?
do.
Because if you see on the screen, like, some character is telling a story, and then he sits down to tell the rest of the story or whatever. To watch that on screen, and you don't have, like, you're not physically doing that.
Right.
The fun part is trying to inform trying to make that decision to make that voice sound as realistic as possible. But to get back to your original point, it was super awkward at first. I'm not sure how much posing or whatever I did at the start, but once you get into it, once you've kind of learned the basics of it, it's all about how can you make the performance the best.
Well, I think that's fascinating what you're talking about. Were you thinking like that at the beginning about what it was when they sat down in a chair? I mean,
absolutely not.
Yeah, at the beginning.
Yeah,
what I was thinking about at the beginning is, man, I hope I get here today on time.
Oh,
wow. And then once we got that down, it was more like, gosh, I hope I can read this line to the end, because a lot of what anime is, and a lot of this dubbing stuff, it's an exercise in flash reading. Like, you don't get the script in advance. You don't get to watch the episode in advance. We do now with some of the programming we're doing now with Funimation, where it's where you will have a chance to, maybe if you're a main character, if you're prepared enough, you can go watch the episode online the day before you do it.
Wow.
But back in I'd say 98% of cases, you get the script, they go, this is what your character is, and you go, all right, and they go, let's read the first line, here we go, and you just have to kind of bolt, and it's a lot of it's instinct.
How many characters do you all do? Not just Dragon Ball Z, but all the different anime.
Yeah, that's a long list.
Is that hard to keep all the characters?
They don't all come back.
When you're doing a new one, and when you're, how much are you involved in the creating of the
A lot of us, when we're in the creation of the voice, a lot of times it's either in your audition or when that director calls you in to go like, I want you to do this, and you go like, what is it? And they go, I don't know, take a look at it, and you go, okay, fine. They go, you get 5 seconds to figure it out.
That's it.
And then you just figure out what voice you want to do and just do it.
And you dial it in right there, or
You have to try and...
I mean, in most cases, a voice director, when they've made that choice, they've got an idea. They go, well, I know where Josh's voice sits, and I like that for this character, you know. And so Josh comes in, and it's like, well, okay, here's the character, and you know he'll take a stab at it, and I may say, oh yeah, do you remember that character you did in? And I will bring up whatever show, and he may remember part of that, or maybe he'll remember it perfectly, or maybe I'll pull a reference. But yeah, no, it usually doesn't fall on the actor to like. You know, I mean, it falls on the actor to come up with a voice, and they develop that. But like, if you're returning to a character that you did 4 years ago or whatever, in most cases they'll have a reference of, here's what you sounded like 4 years ago. Can you do that again?
Back when we were first doing it, though, we didn't have a lot of like really great technology. Like in '98, '99, even up through 2003, we didn't have the best technology. So the concept of keeping a folder of lines on the desktop, you were going to use all 128 megabytes worth of your RAM just to keep it on the desktop. So we would do these things we would have these reference lines. Like they wouldn't be able to play them for me all the time. I would just know that I had these lines that I could say in a character's voice. Like, well, Vegeta's didn't actually have a line. His was just screaming. It was like, ha, ha! And I was like, yep, I'm in character. And then, but I remember like, I could probably like remember all.
Hello, brother.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's every time Justin comes in to record, he'll say that line before he starts.
That is true. I forgot all about that. Yeah, Barry would get us really keyed up on. That's your reference line. Remember that line. That's
so
what you say
one
at the
line
beginning of. Yeah.
And with Kami is like, Piccolo, we are one. I bet every recording that's been of Kami has always had that at the beginning of a session, because I'm just like, that's how I know. Piccolo.
Get into it.
And Elise Bowman, I remember hers just to annoy, like she plays a character called Pan. Her reference line annoyed the crap out of me because she would come in and she'd go, cheeseburgers, cheeseburgers. I'm like, stop that, please.
That's the go-to.
But yeah, back before technology was so great that you could have a pile of MP3s on the desktop to remind you of what your line was. It was, you had to kind of keep it all kind of in your head. Fortunately, we hadn't done 600 voices back then just yet. Like we were only on, we were back only in the teens of voices, like the 10 or 20 voices back in those days. So,
what's the hardest voice you've had to do?
Easily, easily Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z. He's got this scratchy quality when he talks. So even just talking kind of hurts your voice after a while. And it was the same with his and Raditz. Like where just to make the voice, you have to throw twice as much air into it. You have to rattle the back of your voice box a little bit just to speak it, and then you add all the fighting and the screaming and stuff on top of it. And the fact that these characters are always angry and always yelling, and then it made for painful sessions.
Some of the real low-voiced characters that scream a lot can be tough. A lot, just in that lower down here, it's such a low register, and then screaming like that. That can hurt.
And are you having to hydrate and water? I mean, what are you doing to prepare your voice for that?
No.
I mean, are you just... Do you blow them out?
There are probably different approaches here.
Well, that's another thing about Texas. Yes. We don't worry about things like safety. But it's true, though. Like in California, like when we started working with a lot of actors from California and so forth, they'd come in with their 40-liter bottle of water and nectar and I
never understood all that stuff.
They bring in their 40 tea packets and lemons and a whole basket of honey and stuff like that. And we're just like, oh, sorry, you need that stuff? Okay, cool. Yeah, whatever. Take a break. We don't need that. There is a product though that a lot of people use, and I use at this point. Okay. And it's probably not going to interfere with any of your sponsors on this show because it's a Chinese herb called Ninjong Pa Pe Kwa or something like that. And it's this loquat and honey liquid that a lot of actors use. They call it Hulk juice, where if you've hurt your voice really badly, you can eat some of this stuff. You can find it on Amazon or whatever, or wherever you buy your products. but it's just like this almost loquat honey packet that'll soothe your voice if you've kind of screwed it up. I give it to other actors. I don't need it myself.
Yes. I prefer cigarettes and whiskey.
Yeah, there you go.
I did theater when I was in high school, and I got an opportunity to see Jesus Christ Superstar in '94. The guys who had done the movie were touring and doing a touring live show of it. And so I met Ted Neely and Carl Anderson, who were the actors in the '72 Norman Jewison musical movie.
Sure.
And so when I met Ted Neely, who has a fantastic song in that musical called Gethsemane, and it's just way up there in the stratosphere, and man, he just nails it. Anyway, so at the conclusion of the show, he and all the other cast members were outside the back of the theater signing autographs, as most times can happen at those kinds of things. And I asked him, how do you hit those notes? How do you nail that stuff out? He's apparently a drummer, and he was telling me he started as a drummer and couldn't afford a PA system in their junior high band that they were in, and so he would just sing, just scream above the drums and the PA system, or above the guitars and the drums. And that's he said that's how I got my chops ready for what I'm doing now. Wow. So hearing that as a junior in high school, I guess somewhere along the lines, I adopted a similar personality. Yeah, just scream and yell, scream and yell, just scream and yell.
That's true.
The convention, what was it like when you went to your first one? I mean, you've probably seen
Oh, dude.
the audience reaction, the crowd.
We have such good stories about those. Like, because before I was on Dragon Ball, I'd never even been to a convention. I don't even think I don't think I'd ever been to a convention of any sort. Not even like the Houston, Texas air conditioning and heating convention or anything like that. I didn't even know that the concept of a convention even existed. Like,
Gremlins was my only association to conventions. When the dad is at the inventors convention, and I goes, oh, that's a convention, or but like outside of movies, same thing.
I wasn't even smart enough to know what that was.
To know what, I had no idea.
So when they told you,
I think the first convention we went to was in like 1999. It was. Myself and the guy named Sean Schimmel, he's the voice of Goku on the show.
Okay.
Stephanie Nadolny was the voice of Gohan, and Sonny Strait, the voice of Krillin. We went to San Diego Comic-Con. So we went from like never going to a convention before to going to what is like at the time the largest convention in at least the largest pop culture convention of all time, and we just didn't know what to expect. I didn't know. I was like, hey, it's a free trip to California. I'm like, I'm in, whatever. Like, back in those days, Funimation had no money, so they put us all in this, like, basically all in one hotel room at, like, the base of the very base of the LAX airport. Like, the planes would fly over, like, 50 feet over our head, and we'd all carpool in, and then we went to the show, and we had a 4-hour-long line of people waiting, and I was like, for us? Really? Like, is this a joke? Am I on candid camera? What's happening here? And so it was a trip to see that, because I guess it was the first time the voice cast had ever been to a convention before, and I think that's what started a lot of things. Now we go to conventions almost every weekend. Well, some of us do. Like I say almost every weekend. That's what my wife believes, but it's like like half the weekends of the year I go to conventions because it's a great way to interact with fans and kind of like. There's a closer connection we have to the fan base because some of those shows we're working on now, like Full Metal Alchemist, not Full Metal, My Hero Academia, and a lot of the more popular anime that are happening right now, they're happening very close to when they're being dubbed very close to when they happen in Japan. Maybe sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes simultaneously in some of these cases. And so we go and we meet people, and it's like being on The Walking Dead or like the Breaking Bad or something like that. You get to work on a show, and then next week people get to see it on television, and it's pretty fun to interact with people to hear their impressions of it. Because back when we started, we would record them, and it might be like, heck, it might be a year later by the time anyone even got it on a VHS tape, and then another year before we met those people. So it's
well, and then we're also working on a show that had been animated probably 4 to 5 years prior to when we were working on it from when it was animated originally. So the marketplace, and perhaps a lot of this can be attributed to Dragon Ball, but the marketplace for this particular type of entertainment, anime, has has drastically changed. I mean, like you were saying, it used to take a year and a half. It would take 16 months in some cases to get a program from when we began dubbing it to when it was completely released on VHS. And then there's VHS, DVD. Sorry. And then there was the advent of moving from those single sticks with 4 episodes on it to when we're releasing 12 episodes per release. So, I mean, really the whole market has changed so much over the last 20 years. Duh. But, you know.
And now we get to meet people immediately. We get that fan feedback like almost immediately after recording those shows. It's a cool, it's like a, sometimes it's like, feels like this symbiotic thing where you're doing the best thing possible for your fan base, and the fans kind of really respond to that well, and you don't want to let them down. So anytime there's a good moment, you feel like you're not just, we used to feel like we're just trapped in this vacuum that eventually some people might see this show, but to now we're engaging with people who've just seen what you worked on a week ago.
Absolutely.
Well, and Kara talked about, I mean, she's met people that's inspired her, that your show has affected people's lives. What you do.
Completely.
I think that's amazing. Can you think of a story that someone or a fan that's stuck with you?
We've done a couple of shows, but for me, probably one of the most memorable ones was doing an anime convention on Kadena Air Force Base and then the Marine Base out there in Okinawa, Japan. So that really blew my mind, was to fly almost back to where all of this comes from and meet with 50,000 American troops that are over there stationed, and there's a couple of things that occur to me, and I think occur to anybody that finds themselves in that situation. One, our military is way younger than you think. That's the first one.
Yeah, right.
You're way older. That's what I figured out than I thought. But I mean, my gosh, going all the way out there and finding that our English dub of a Japanese cartoon is what are making these American GIs in Japan feel at home. That's
cool.
Twisted.
That's
twisted.
That's very cool.
Yeah, there's so many people we've met over the years that have really been inspired by. Like I met some of them, just really make like are heart wrenching, because Dragon Ball is a long show, close to 300 episodes of the original kind of Dragon Ball Z show, and people would watch it like because it's so long, and it was because it's very serial in nature, and there wasn't anything quite like it. A lot of people, when they were going through traumatic experiences at home, would kind of escape into that, or when they were, a lot of people in hospitals when they have to do extended several months of treatments for things, chemotherapy and whatnot. Getting through these hospital stays, watching these characters who kind of train you to like stick it out, like try and find a new level. Doesn't matter how hard the pain is. Coming close, like one of the themes is like the closer you come to death, the more strong you become afterwards. So a lot of these people took these messages and inspired themselves to become better. Like. There's two cases that really like get to me. One poor kid has passed since, but there was a kid who was younger, running through the kitchen. His mother was cooking. He bumped into her and she spilled boiling water like all over his arm, and just burned him completely, melted his body away like at the top. When I met him, he was in his 20s. Every single part of his body that wasn't almost gone, like flesh, was absolute muscle, and the dude's like a black belt in karate, because he watched Dragon Ball when he was in there, and he knew he was just trying to make himself get better. And like the guy's like an expert martial artist. He's got missing like parts of flesh here, but every other part was a completely toned, muscular martial artist. And then the other kid that really inspired me was a kid who was playing out by his house and bumped into an Africanized bee hive.
Wow.
And he's allergic to bees. And he got stung like over 300 to 500 times. And he survived by pretending that he was Vegeta and powering up the whole time during the thing. And he survived the attack. And I reached out to his family after I found out about it, and then invited him to come to a convention. He's kind of got some pretty bad PTSD, clearly,
sure,
as you would have from that sort of thing. But it was Dragon Ball that gave him the inspiration to kind of like charge up and power through it. And he survived because of our show, and that's pretty crazy to me.
When you asked the question, you were asking us for these stories, hearing about these people inspired, and Chris's explanation that he just gave to that answer, he kind of snuck in that stories that inspired him.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I get blown away by, is that I've been working on this show for a very long time, and I've certainly met people who the inspiration they've gotten from this show has been more inspiration for me than the show has been for me, which makes me wonder, am I watching the show wrong? What am I not picking up? But I mean, the fans for Dragon Ball, for Yu Yu, for all of these shows are, gosh, they've got to be the best in the world, really.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, there's certainly no stronger, I don't know, there's nothing that makes me work harder than coming in Monday morning after having spent 3 days with fans at some city across America, who have literally spent their whole weekend waiting in lines, waiting to meet us. I mean, that'll send you back to Monday morning ready to scream at the top of your lungs, and you don't care if you lose your voice.
And at these conventions, these kids in these lines, they're not, like, I say kids, they're all in their 20s now. These people in these lines, they're not on their phones.
No.
Like, they're all talking to each other, man. They're all here for they're all waiting in these lines at conventions. They're all here for a similar, they all like the same show. They're all waiting to see the same person. So they have a lot in common. And people make lifelong friends waiting in lines at conventions. It's a very social thing.
It's fascinating. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show. I went through the same experience with Barney. I was a guy, I'd never been in a costume. I'd never done any of this stuff. Same thing. You know, I got in the costume. I didn't know how to dance, and I learned all that. I was 23 years old. All of a sudden, I started realizing the responsibility of it, because I've gone to hospitals and seen kids and these things, and it changed my life. I didn't realize it at the time. And I got to wonder what it's like for you when you're seeing this kid or these kids that, I mean, saved their lives and did the things they did. It's kind of heavy at times if you think about it, and how when you're doing your job,
sure,
it's not just a job. I mean, the paycheck's great and all of that, but you're affecting people's lives.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people will come up. They don't even have to tell me what their story is. They'll just walk up and go, "This show meant a lot to me."
Sure.
And I like look them in the eye, and I can see their entire history. Like,
yeah, right.
Like, your show raised me, and I'll like stand up, I'll shake their hand, I go like, "I'm with you on that." Like this show raised me. Like this, I've been working on this show half of my life now. Like half of my entire life, I've been working on Dragon Ball and these anime shows.
Yeah.
So I've grown up with this. So in a way, it was kind of part of my family. So it's like when your mom tells you something, it doesn't mean as much as like when someone else can come in and tell you the same exact thing. Maybe that's why Dragon Ball never made me lose weight. But everyone I meet at the store, like at the convention, they're all like, "I work out every day at Dragon Ball. I turn that show on, and it like pushes me to lift 8,000 pounds." I'm like, man, I wish that show could motivate me to get out of bed sometimes.
The show did motivate us to get out of bed.
That's true.
It was just get out of bed and sit in a chair, or scream in a booth.
But yeah, there's a responsibility there, and I think our legacy on this show is going to be how much effort we put into it over the years. And you know, it may not have the world's best acting in it. It may not have it may not be the best story ever told, but like we threw our guts into it. We left our flesh from our voices on those microphones that we recorded on. Microphones, oddly enough, that looked exactly like this, with a stand exactly like this, like kind of a swing arm like this in the booth. But like, that's what I think that's what we'll be known for. We never like kind of held back and only gave our second best. We always like strive to do the best we could possibly do.
There was always a feel of what we were doing every day was somehow unique, somehow important, and that we were lucky to be doing it.
Yeah. And it's only now that we're getting this feedback from fans. And in fact, it's only now that we're starting to get feedback from our Japanese partners. And there've been some new Dragon Ball movies that have come out over the last several years. And I remember it really touched me when the Japanese came and watched the film with us, and they came and talked to us afterwards and said, you guys are the cast of Dragon Ball in America. And that meant so much to us, because we always held the Japanese version of it on this pedestal, like, well, that's them. Like, these guys are way up here and we're just down here kind of in the trenches. But when they told us that, like, our version is what made Dragon Ball successful in America, that really meant something to us, because we were just kind of in a vacuum doing our thing, trying to do our best of it. Now that we've met everybody, it's a different story.
So you've met the original cast. Have you met
Some of them.
that have played your
I mean, some of us.
and what was that like? What was that experience like?
I mean, it's funny how much I've found that, like, Ryo Horikawa is an example, the guy who plays the voice, the Japanese voice of Vegeta. I've met him, I've become friends with him, and I've actually gone to Japan to teach a workshop, because he has a acting school in Japan, and he's come to my studio to work on stuff here in America. And what's funny is that I always assumed that when the Japanese were recording Dragon Ball Z, they literally had this entire network of people that were standing over them going like, here's exactly what your character should sound like in this moment. And the creator of the show would be there and they'd check a box and they go, that was perfection, check mark. Like, that was awesome, congratulations. Turns out that his experience working on the show was very similar to mine. Like, he went in, the creator of the show wasn't there. The creator of the show is agoraphobic. He never leaves his house. Like, the creator of Dragon Ball Z never leaves. Like, he's never been seen in public. He would just come into the sessions, and he wasn't sure if his character was going to be alive a week from now. He's like, I looked at all the other characters; they're all dead, so I didn't think I'd be around this long. But yeah, it's really fun to meet someone for like their counterpart from another country that's worked on the same show, and you both have your own connection with the same character. And what's weird is that in some cases, in a lot of cases, they were the same feeling about the same character, even though you weren't in the same room or had the same director. Another example is Josh here. When we cast him as Majin Buu, we just cast him because we thought his voice of Pillsbury Doughboy was really funny, right? Like, he was in a comedy troupe, did this Pillsbury Doughboy voice. I'm like, that would be really funny for a big fat pink character. And what's weird is we hadn't even heard the Japanese voice of it. And when we eventually did, we're like, whoa, that's pretty darn close. Like, that we were pretty lucky. We found the same voice all these miles away without any connection with one another. So,
do you try to stay true to what they're as much as possible?
I think there's more of a thought to that now than there used to be. I think a big reason though for that is the fact that now we're dubbing for streaming. And I would say that 10 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago, we were really dubbing for DVD. And then before that, it was dubbing for VHS. So those three things are different. And during that DVD stage, that's when our audience, as well as ourselves, were getting incredibly associated with the Japanese original soundtrack. And so I think it was probably during that early 2000s, mid 2000s, that there began to be a much stronger focus on, well, let's listen to kind of the color palette, as the audible color palette that was used in the Japanese version. We'll base ours off of that. And we've had a lot of success kind of casting in that.
It depends. It varies from director to director. A lot of times when I'm working on a show, my goal is to make sure it's as enjoyable to watch in English as it is to watch in Japanese. Luckily, we have really good translators that work on these shows and really good writers that adapt them, so you don't have to worry as much about like whether it's accurate or not. Back in the earliest days, we weren't sure if it was accurate or not because we never saw good translations, and the writers didn't have the mission to stick to as close to the Japanese intention as possible. It was just make it sound cool.
Weren't we also using the Mexican, the Spanish dub?
The video if you tried to play the video that we were recording to, it would actually be Spanish because we couldn't get the Japanese materials. But the translations were still the Japanese translations, and they were really bad back then. But right now, like Funimation particularly is really good at being able to achieve all of those things at once. And I think it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We've gotten so good at the process of making it that now we can kind of zero in and zero in and focus on what's important. That's like keeping people who are fans of the Japanese happy and people who are who just want to like do their homework and listen to an anime and not have a chance to watch it, something for them as well.
You know, and another thing to consider on all of this stuff is that a lot of those translators are they've been doing this now for 20 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of these voice actors have been doing it for 20 years. And it turns out that when you do a thing for that amount of time, in most cases, you turn out to be pretty good at it.
Yeah.
So now you guys are also doing video games. Is that what's the difference in that? Is it harder? Is it easier? Is it?
I think it's profoundly harder in a lot of ways. Not with all games, but I'd say it's harder. Actually, I'm trying to find a balanced answer to this, but I'd say video games are harder than anime because anime, at least your aggressive stuff is spread out over 20 minutes and you have maybe a couple days to do it. But in video games, we have to do an entire series worth of like sounds and reactions and on fire reactions and blasting reactions and like punching. Like, let's get 30 punching reactions. Let's get 30 being punched reactions. Let's get 30 being punched harder reactions. 30 like flying through the air reactions. And it's exhausting, grueling work. And the timelines are really crunched, and you have to go. You typically have to move kind of fast. So that's, I mean, from a vocal stress standpoint, the games are definitely harder than anime.
For sure. And remember, most of the way the anime is being dubbed nowadays is we're dubbing it, as it's coming out. So you're not working on 12 episodes at once. You're working on one episode this week.
Wow.
So, Chris comes in to record All Might this week. It may not be, but for only 30 minutes.
Yep.
But yeah, doing a video game, you're going to be hitting it hard for about 3 or 4 hours, if not more.
Dude. Or like
days.
Sometimes there are times when I can't even record more than an hour of it because it'll just be it'll be the day I come in and they go, yeah, we're doing all the fighting today, and I get an hour into it and my voice is already hurting. It's.
And is that something they call? They can see your voice is tiring out, or you call it?
If you have a nice director, they do. If you don't, it's like, I'm sorry, it's only been an hour. Why don't you just keep going? But
also, you're talking about shows now that the three of us have been working on for quite some time. Sure. So you can kind of look at it and go, well, Chris has got to look. This is going to be him screaming the whole time. You're going to get an hour, maybe 90 minutes out of him. That's all you're going to get. And so we'll schedule it based off of that knowledge.
Now.
Yeah, totally.
I'm thinking about it when you're talking about the video game and you're talking about some of these things you have to do, like flying through the air. Is that something you got to think about? Do you need a moment? Can you just automatically do? I'm thinking, well, what the heck would that sound like?
You can test me if you want.
Okay, you are flying through the air, and then you fly through 3 trees before you finally hit a mountain and explode. Perfect.
Now give him one.
That.
No, I'm not good with the direction part.
Oh, come on.
Josh, give him one.
You crash through a mall, and you pick up a pair of 36 Slims from the Gap.
Okay.
You get some Dippin' Dots, and then you look for your car.
Oh, wow. Okay, and I'm fighting during this, right?
Yes.
All right, okay. She said, oh, nice shoes. Oh, hold on a second. Those were pants, actually. Never mind. 36 Slim, please. Ow! Oh, Dippin' Dots, thank you. And he lands in the parking lot. At least I have my pants, which won't fit me shortly after I eat all these Dippin' Dots.
Chris Sabat.
You can find this show on Spotify and iHeart, but you've got to see this on YouTube too, because you've got to see what you just had here. As we end this show, I want to ask you guys a question. What's been your favorite thing about being part of not only just Dragon Ball Z but anime?
These fans. That's bar none, far and above. That's the best part of doing this job. First it was, wow, we get to do something creative, but realizing, again, like we talked about, there's this responsibility to this fan base, to this group, and to a degree being beholden to them is a privilege.
Yeah, I'd say just having this ability to kind of grow up in this industry and get to experience voice acting from a time when it wasn't as hard to get into as it is now. You know, people come up to me and are like, how do you get into that? I'm like, I don't have a clue. Like, I was just super, super lucky to get in when I did. Just the ability to grow up in that business, to make mistakes and get to be silly, to get to work on a show when you're just in your, you know, your early 20s, and you get to work with your friends and you just kind of joke around and make something awesome, and then you don't even you make it without a lot of ego, or you just for the sake of doing it. Like, I loved being able to work on this show before we even knew that we had fans.
Yeah.
Because it just allowed us to kind of do it and not think about like how it's being perceived. We just got to make it the way we wanted to make it. I'm very lucky that they chose Dallas or actually technically North Richland Hills as the place they wanted to set up shop, because if they had done it in LA, I wouldn't have been cast. It would have been somebody else. And sure, we may not have made a fortune doing it, but boy, we've all just had a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience, and have flown all over the world to meet people. And I think the coolest gift I have is that I can scribble on a piece of paper and give it to my friend who wants to give it to their friend who loves something so much. And like, it's such an easy transaction to make. And they're like so grateful, like, oh, thank you so much. I'm like, dude, you realize like I'm just writing my name on this. Like, this is not a high pressure thing, but like the ability to have gotten to experience and grow and like kind of grow into this. And now, thank goodness, when we're finally good at it, we have a fan base that acknowledges us, and we get to perform for them on a weekly basis. That's like, we couldn't have done it a better way. Like, it's the coolest thing ever.
I think they see it, though. I love how you talk about how you throw it all out there. You take your voice. This is so serious to you, and I think that's what's so important for the fans, right? They're spending their money. They're passionate about this, but you guys just aren't punching the clock.
They can tell, just like they could tell.
We've never punched a clock.
Right? Just like they could tell with Barney whether or not we were, phoning it in. They can tell that you guys, everybody else on the product, aren't phoning it in either.
It's so funny. You punch in a clock. Like, I remember back in the days when they were just begging us to turn in our timesheets. We're like, I don't know, just 120 hours. I don't know.
It's always tough getting a timesheet from us, that's for sure.
This has been an absolute pleasure. I have enjoyed having you guys here and hear this and see this other world, and thank you so much.
Dude, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
So, once again, thank you for being here on Purple Roads. Remember to keep your eyes, ears, and your heart open, and you'll find your Purple Road. I love you all, and I look forward to seeing you next week.